this presentation. The first part of it is a little bit of a recap. I might be missing something. Could just be, there we go. So I thought I'd just touch on, to start with, as I say, it's going to be the values, the journey so far, the strategic framework, the road ahead, the services we provide. Nigel will come in and do the budget presentation, and then we'll sort of wrap it up, and hopefully that will answer a lot of the questions that we have around budget. So I just, again, thought I'd put the LRC values up. You've seen me do it before. Couple of points I want to make around this is that dot point 3, that constant awareness of the community that we serve and understanding what the needs of the community are. And then probably the last part there is respecting the past, partnering with our community and sustainably creating our future. Respecting the past, I think, is really important because a lot of the decisions that council make or have made are decisions of the past. And I know that they don't all belong to this council, but they are decisions that have been made, and I think it is important that we acknowledge that. The journey. So tonight is our 9th meeting, 7 committee meetings, the training sessions, the workshop, the appointment of the CEO, 117 decisions, and you guys have done that in less than 6 months. So I think that is a significant amount of work that has actually been done so far. You might not feel like you have achieved, but trust me, I think there's a significant amount in that period of time. This was a slide that was put up at your first meeting of council. 2 of those items, the CEO recruitment and the rating strategy, are now completed. Moves us into our strategic framework. Again, you'll hear me banging on about this, and I will bang on about this because these are the documents that the elected body are responsible for presiding over and adopting. Some of those, will get dealt with, very soon in terms of a refreshing of them, renewing of them, or just complete new adoptions. The framework, again, the green and the orange, 2 different sides of the business. The strategic management plans, as I said, I just spoke about them, the operational plans, and you can see that fine line in there between the elected body of working on the business and the staff who work in the business, and we work our way through that tonight. The leadership sort of model, again, you can see there's that overlap between our roles. We've got very much policy, strategic, approving strategies, monitoring, reporting of the elected body, and the staff obviously advising on policy, preparing strategies for approval, implementing, and of course reporting to our council. The road ahead is the strategic plan. As I say, I'm pretty keen on getting that moving very soon. Budget adoption is tonight and will take us right the way through until I think it is the 27th of June from memory. 27th of June. Yep. And the little diagram below that shows a true north and a magnetic north, but both are north, because that's what we're heading in the same direction together. Whether we're all on the same direction, as long as we're heading north, is the really important thing for us. Foundation projects, again, bring up what we're looking to do. Comprehensive policy reviews still on our agenda. Strategic plan review, we will commence that as soon as we can. Boundary reform, which will sit, we are waiting for the process that will be around the boundary reform. And of course, Roseworthy Township, just a slightly different colour because it's just an ongoing project for us and a really key one. From the Office of the CEO, so now we're starting to talk about the services that we actually provide. So the Office of the CEO, which includes governance at the moment, provide the support to elected members, to myself. oversight of all of these meetings, including the preparation of the agendas, minutes, etc. Confidential items in there, providing meeting advice both to internal staff and to elected members, broader governance to the organisation, and of course, management of communications and all of the training that you're involved in. The managing legislative processes, there's all of those things in there that are, just underpin everything that council do. Policy frameworks, as I say, meeting admin, legislative updates, publications, governance, more governance and more governance and more governance, because that's what we do, and the civic services and functions. Into our business and finance team, 3 core areas of finance, organisational development and information services. And there's a whole bunch of services and functions that these teams do to keep the council running, both internally and externally. So organisational development are currently working their way through workforce planning, HR policies. Recruitment is going to be key for that team over the coming months, and we hope that some of our employee turnover starts to subside a bit as our economy stabilises and we start seeing people look to stable employment. I won't go into all of those. Information services, again, that's around our IT systems and our corporate records. Finance team, I don't think I need to talk too much about what they do, heavily involved in what we're here tonight talking about, but equally around our payments and income and expenses of council and managing that. And this is just a quick snapshot of really what goes through those teams. As you can see, that the amount of GL transactions there are, so that's the general ledger transactions. Obviously, some of those are automated transactions, others aren't. The records registered, I think, is the really key one there. That's 50,000 plus records every year. So that is correspondence in and out of our organisation that need to be recorded and registered and kept for defined periods of time. Plant assessments and WHS risk assessments and site assessments all around our WHS systems. IT support, that's the iPads that are in front of you, making sure that they're running well, making sure that our computing systems, etc., are also going well, and that we can get the work done that we want. And of course, corporate risks. Economic development. I'll go straight to this slide, which it looks a complicated slide, but we will provide handouts afterwards around that. That red square in the middle is basically just a snapshot in time of where we are right now. And you can see there are some core legislated plans that sit across the top, economic development plans through the middle, and economic development agreements at the very bottom. There's a number of those that do cross over into different departments, but you can generally see what the economic development department is actually across. A whole bunch of dot points there again, policy project support, connection, local resource connections, economic infrastructure, the Light Invest website, broader economic networking, public art, visitor information, tourism development, placemaking and activation, a whole bunch of work that the economic development team do. Again, they have their own plan, the economic development plan, which currently has those 5 core areas within them. Some advocacy work that they're currently doing, so 4 there, and a number of people would have been aware of the troubles that council are having with SA Water, or I shouldn't say council, but our broader community and development industry is having with SA Water, and the economic development team are very much at the forefront, leading that and engaging with SA Water to try and find solutions to actually get more water into our area to enable our developments to actually proceed. Investment attraction, again, the Light investment prospectus, working with a variety of groups, such as, RDA, Barossa, Seppeltsfield Road, Business Alliance, Kapunda Business Alliance, and of course on the left there, the supporting of the local business through local procurement. Development facilitation, again, that's just sort of a bit of an overview of the Roseworthy development, with some timelines of when we're expecting growth to be there, and our economic development team are again standing right next to our planning team, making sure that we're got the right approach to it. Variety of infrastructure development, and top right corner is probably the most timely one at the moment, with the Bunyip infrastructure, or Bunyip 2 infrastructure, getting ready to be, I won't say getting ready to be rolled out, but are probably in the final stages of the engineering design and planning. Silo Art, and of course Farm Centre and Town Square there, that department was all at the core of. Again, infrastructure development, placemaking, activating, the light tourism, everything is there for that department. Strategy and development, again, that department responsible for some very key customer service, libraries, development, community development, our strategic planning, and of course the regulatory services. Probably as a department oversee the most legislative or oversee the most legislation of any of the other departments, and again, just a bit of a snapshot of the 21-22, showing the amount of people who are visiting our libraries, the library programs that have been run, the development applications themselves. And I think this one really tells a great story, that while you get development applications, the actual amount of inquiries you get for developments is actually double that, as people engage very early when they're submitting an application, and it isn't just a cold application that sits in front of the team for assessment. And you can see the value of the development that they're overseeing. Library programs, again, I might just come back one. So again, 3,200 people are going through our libraries and getting involved in a variety of different programs. Wiggle and Giggle, which I believe is sort of a young, or a parents with very young children, social inclusion programs, skill development, digital literacy for all age groups, some of the story trails, and again, with those branches at Freeling and Kapunda, which are basically 9 to 5 as a minimum, Monday to Friday, and a little bit of weekend works, and then some of the outreach centres as well. Community development, again, very much Linda and Steve's area, lots of different activities there, and 27 events and 47 assessed so far for 22-23. So a team of people who very much are trying to support those community events and programs as best they can. And I think, having a very small team of people, I think they do a remarkable job. Again, that's just some photos and some grants program work that the team do. Roseworthy Township expansion, I think we've probably seen a number of these statistics before, but again, it just highlights how much work, how much effort, involvement the development team is doing, and that continues on a day-to-day basis, particularly around some of the infrastructure agreements. And while we think to ourselves that it's just about done, there is a code amendment down at in the Roseworthy area at the moment on a parcel of land called Yenlo, and it almost feels as though we're having to redo the work that we've already done, even though we've got documents that would suggest how we do it. It's almost a restarting negotiations again. A range of our initiatives there, again, at the community level. Strategic plan, we have this in as a business case for 23 and beyond, and of course would be keen to develop one with this council, with this particular group of council, I should say. Infrastructure and environment. Again, I think we see a lot of the work they do. There's a significant amount that they are responsible for. And they do it with 29 field staff, 2 trainees, resheeting of 45 k's of road a year. You know, the rubble, sorry, not the rubble, I was going to say the rubbish that's collected from the roadsides, 100 tonne might not sound like it's a great deal, but I think it would be fair to say that the majority of that is picked up by hand, because simply of where it's dumped. Patrol grading, 1,200 kilometres of patrol grading a year is done out of our 2 patrol graders. The slashing of open space and road reserves, and you can see all those other statistics that are there. Community wastewater schemes and the waste management. Community wastewater schemes, we've got the 4 systems there, with 1, 2, probably about 3.5 people involved in that. And then, of course, our curbside collection, which is completely outsourced, except the overall management of the contract, and some new services that come on board. Property, again, the statistics speak, you know, volumes, 335 plus properties that council have. Obviously, some of those are very much actively managed and some of them are, I would call, passively managed. If some of them we would probably struggle to find when they're water reserves that just sit in the middle of other people's properties. So they're the services that we will deliver on an annual basis, and those services will get delivered from within our annual business plan. So the recommendation last night from the audit committee was that the budget that was put forward looked like a fairly reasonable budget, a budget that will be able to maintain the services that council currently enjoys and that our community enjoys. So with that, I'll pause on my speaking there and I'll hand over to our finance manager, Nigel, who can take us almost home on it.
Yeah, thank you very much, Richard. That was a great presentation, giving us a reminder of why we're here, how we got here and what we need to do to stay here. So thank you for that. And the range of services are just absolutely extraordinary. And when you break it down like that, it really opens your eyes. So thank you. And Nigel, thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Always start with just a reminder of the key dates, just to make sure that we're all on the same page as to where we're headed to. I'll talk about the cash advance, the bench review. I'll give you some budget highlights. I just briefly want to talk about what we did with the asset management plan and indexation, just to complete the entire picture. Talk about some council rate increase comparisons, which previous council have enjoyed hearing that before. Rating options and some discussion points, and then sure we'll have some questions. So last night we had the Audit Risk Committee, which made the recommendation to you that Richard's just shown you. Tonight we're looking at the public consultation draft of the annual business plan. So we then go to 21 days of public consultation, and then you'll have the joys of a special meeting to hear all of those public submissions. Hopefully we get a little bit more than the none that we got last year. At that time we'll give you another update on what's happening with the latest values from the Valuer General as they keep coming in on a weekly basis, and impacts on the amount of revenue received. And finally, we're hoping that you'll endorse all of this and declare the rates towards the end of June. just a brief reminder about the CAD review. So there's a resolution to say that those cash advance debentures that we're not currently using as a consequence of paying them out from the Bunyip One takeout, we've got a resolution to say we'd review those as part of the budget process. So we'll be looking to you for a final decision on that at the final meeting in late June. So we thought we're inappropriate to do anything with that until we've actually heard the responses to the public consultation, in case there's a change of heart with some things. I don't expect you to read this, but when you get the copy of this presentation, you can study it at your leisure. But I thought it'd be useful to include in the presentation that there's a couple of pieces of the puzzle regarding the asset management plan, and you would have had a communication that said these are the numbers in terms of what's planned for the 4-year budget, and there's an asset management plan which is on the website for you to review. But I just wanted to put this as a reminder that what we do with the asset management plan that's on the website is that the website numbers are in 2021 dollars. So when that was approved. So what we do across the 4-year works program is to index those by inflation to try and keep them in current value terms. Otherwise, we'd be falling behind. So maybe you can study that at your leisure. But so this year, we've indexed it by the Reserve Bank's trim mean. That sounded professional enough to index. So it's 1.062. So 6.2% is what we've indexed it by for this business plan, which I'm sure someone over here will spend those monies. Now I'm stuck. Thought I'd share this with you because I enjoyed this last weekend. It's the ABC starting their rounds of reporting on what councils are doing to their ratepayers with very large increases. So this was their online. Rory McLaren has been out obviously asking people what their rate increases would be. I note he says at the bottom there, yet to be revealed. I don't think we're hiding it, but he hasn't actually phoned me or contacted me, so obviously he wasn't interested or something. But probably the couple of those I've highlighted, probably in too bold a colour, but I like to compare with some of those, like Adelaide Hills, similar sorts of situations. Whilst they look like they're going to do a 6.9% increase, Gawler 6.5%, and Clayford 7.9%. At the lower end, Unley 4% and Copper Coast 4.4%. But to be honest, what do those things actually really mean when they ask people? It's probably what their projected increase in rate revenue is, because they wouldn't have adopted their rates as yet. Oh, flat. No, work that time. As I said last year, as part of the rating policy review, we got a sense of where we are in terms of comparable sorts of councils that experience some of the same sorts of challenges with growth and tourism and having a large part of the area being agriculture, etc. So these were just trying to give an indication of where we actually sit. So how did we do it? And there's probably pros and cons to this approach, but it just gives you a bit of a benchmark. We took the 2 land use categories that our biggest rate revenue earners, or something like around about 90% of the rate revenue, and we worked out that coloured at the top there, which is disappearing. So the 394,000 is the And this is for the 22-23 years, so the current year that we're in. The average residential property valuation was 394,000. I think last year it was, the previous year was 356. And primary production was average of 802,000. What we do is take those values and apply them against the rate in the dollars for these comparable sorts of councils. I like numbers, so it's an interesting sort of exercise, but one of the things that is quite different in the rate and the dollars is that of the 9 councils I'm looking at, about 5 of them use a fixed charge. So the other 4, like us, use a minimum rate. So for instance, at Barossa, they have a fixed charge of $400, and then they have a rate in the dollar of the capital value. So depending on how high your fixed charge is, has an impact on how much the capital value influences the overall amount of rates being paid. The one that has the highest, and it's the maximum allowed under Local Government Act fixed charge, is our friends over at Playford, who this year had a $1,043 fixed charge. Rate in the dollar of about 0.2, so something like about half of our rate in the dollar. If you worked out probably what their minimum sort of property values would be, I would expect they've probably got a minimum rate equivalent with a fixed charge and a smaller rate in the dollar of something like $1,400. So very expensive when you have that sort of fixed charge for I suppose the lower value properties. Why did I really do all this? Was to come up with this, and that's just a comparison. So you just broadly, generally understand where you would fit in this sort of comparison. So we're the dark brownie for residential and the light green for primary production. Over on this far side here, the blue is the average residential of this group of councils, and the darker yellow is the average primary production. So you can see that generally we're probably around, well, we're less than the average, so we're lowish. And I'd expect if the rate recommendation in the business plan gets approved this year, and based on what's happening elsewhere, we'll probably move to the lowest rather than being around about the average. So that would be a reasonable achievement. So with that in mind, some of the budget highlights to me: 17,000 just change in effect. Balanced budget for 23-24. We've made sure that there's at least a small surplus in every year of the 10 years of long-term financial plan. We're especially mindful that this annual business plan will get scrutinised by the SCOSA, because it's our turn for them to decide whether our long-term financial plan is sustainable. So I don't really want to see any, I'm sure you don't either anyway, see any red on that line at the moment. So a small surplus is what we're targeting. The finance charges, the estimate in there around about 500,000 for interest. Now, I need to be clear to say that if you look in the projects, that calculation is based on spending the numbers that we've included for the light stimulus review. So there's 1.5 million for a number of years that we've just factored in there, which basically is just soaking up the cash advance, the pension money that we borrowed for that stimulus program. But But the underlying rule of that program was that we would be using it to go and get grant money to enhance the money that this council is providing. It's quite likely that the rest of the projects that were being spoken about, especially with a change in state and federal Commonwealth government attitudes in terms of budgeting now, that's going to be very, very difficult to get those grants. So I believe Richard will be bringing a review to you about that stimulus program in the near future. But at this stage, we're assuming that we're basically spending the rest of it a quarter each year, and that we'll be paying interest on it. So if that doesn't proceed in that way, we'll be saving some interest. There might be an opportunity to say I feel a little bit chuffed in that when we were putting together those finance charge estimates, Andrew and I were sitting there going, well, what's going to happen with interest rates? And about that time, people were saying, no, they're probably going to be on hold for a while. And we're thinking, no, that's probably not the way that's going to go. So you'll see in the report that we've assumed at that point that there's going to be at least 2 more %, increases. So we've factored in the one that happened today, and we're assuming there's going to be another one later in the year before they're finished. And if we believe what the Reserve Bank is saying, that things will then sort of stabilise, and we might even get a reduction towards the end of the following year, but we haven't factored that in at all at this stage. Apart from what I was saying about cash advance debentures, there's no new borrowing flagged in this budget. So it's only basically using existing approvals. I suppose a particular highlight is that the forecast is that the overall use of those borrowings will be 11.1 million as at the end of this financial year, and what we had at the end of last financial year, beginning of this financial year, was 28 million. So that's obviously a sizable change in the amount of indebtedness. A key part of the overall program is an increase in the capital works program, which is something like a 34% increase, excluding that light stimulus money. So if we are able to do something with that, well, that will only further enhance that. So we've constrained the service charge increases as promised when we put together the assumptions on which this would be built. We're saying that this is not a year to create inflationary increases in our community. So even though some of the costs are probably a little bit higher than what we're saying here, that we've constrained those increases for the refuse collection bin services and the CWMS. We're looking at a minimum rate again around the 3%. We rounded it to 925. That was a nice number, so that worked out to 2.8%. On the proposal, that's the assumptions that are in your annual business plan. That affects 605 assessments, of which is about 8% of our total. And the rate revenue policy says around about 10% is where we should probably set that, and no more from an equity point of view. And the underlying general rate increase, underlying assumption is we're looking for, as we proposed in the original assumptions, a 3% net increase in general rates. And I say net is that will be after whatever we assume rate rebates might be, if you go ahead and approve that. But I think it's probably worth emphasising, and it's related to what's on the screen. how is it possible that you can achieve this? How is it possible to deliver all those services and keeping in mind what other councils are facing with significant increases well above what we're planning to do? How can you have such a good news story? And it's reasonable to assume that, as I've said previously, this council is in fortunate times. Someone some years ago, I suppose, took the risk in terms of that Bunyip 1 scheme, and the chickens came home to roost this year. Significant pay down of debt, significantly reduced our finance charges, and that's enabling you to have such a expansionary capital works program, but at the same time constrain your rate increases well below what I expect probably generally the ratepayers might be expecting from all the publicity. But we do have to be tempered in that. That's what I talk about. Now get into more of the rating detail. What I spoke about when we last talked about what are the options, and I suppose I quickly got over option 1 was just to keep the current differential rates and see what happened. But of course, everybody agreed we wouldn't be doing that. So option 2 was to reduce differential rates to lower the amount of rates payable, and then option 3 would be to consider differential rates and a possible rebate like we did this financial year for those high value increases. At the time, all we had was the Valuer General's value. We hadn't got to the point where the system enabled us to put it in, the new system enabled us to put in and run the impact on every single property, and we've since done that. And I think it's fair to say I had a little bit of a change of heart because now I see exactly what's going on, and I'll share that with you now. It's a picture that's not quite what I was expecting. Remember the last time we were talking about averages? Averages can be very, very, very deceiving in this context. And I've said it before this week, and that is that this is one of the most difficult valuation changes, probably the most difficult valuation changes I've ever seen in the times I've been in councils. It's all over the place. And that's why when you say, well, we'll constrain our revenue to 3%, that might mean a reduction for somebody, might mean 3% for somebody else, but it'll still mean a significant increase because of the valuation change for somebody. I assume the people will have the same or less rates, they won't be phoning us. It'll be the other people that will still be saying, well, that said 3% in the paper. How come it's a lot more than that? Well, the picture I'm trying to show you here is that I've plotted every land use assessment. So this top left one is the residential valuation increases. So we have every assessment plotted, and when you plot thousands of them, they will just have a block colour. So down at this end, you have assessments that are no increase, so they're just flat. So you can see there's a few in that area. Then you have a very large number of our residential assessments that are around about that 10% increase. And that's one key message, is that they get a 10% rebate. It's not going to mean anything to them if that's all they receive, is that 10% rebate. And then we go above. And what I did was an assumption, without researching every single property, that if it was over a 30% valuation increase, and I knew a few of those just below that were definitely not in terms of development. If they're over 30%, that the house has been finished or they put on an addition or something of that nature. So I've excluded them from the rebate calculation to say they're probably not entitled. So there might be a few of those in there, but based on that assumption, within the residential area, there's 3,062 assessments that would be entitled to some form of rebate because they're over a 10% valuation increase. I should have introduced that saying that a Local Government Act, you are required to consider what assistance you can provide for these sort of extraordinary valuation increases. The thing that you don't have any guidance on is what is extraordinary. So that's something that's the council needs to be happy with, is what that actually means and where you should provide the assistance, because 5% might be extraordinary to somebody and not necessarily to others. So that's residential. The other one, and there's probably others here that might not be so surprised, but I was particularly surprised at the extreme volatility in primary production. Again, that the 10.9% average increase across all primary production assessments is terribly misleading, because the individuals within that group are quite different. I've done a little circle down the bottom of the chart, and the reason for that is that there's 100 assessments down the bottom, and some of them quite sizable, that have had no valuation change whatsoever. So something's going on there. That's changing land sales or property sales in that regard is having an impact there that's flowed on to their valuation increase. Then there's a fairly steep jump, and you'll notice that quite early on in the chart, they breached that 10%. So there's a significant proportion above that 10% notional rebate line. Primary production has a lot less assessments overall than the residential, but of all the assessments, there's 1,481 that would be entitled to a rebate. I should have said over here, there's 598 of those 3,000. The rebate would be less than $10. So it's probably arguable some of those people wouldn't even bother to apply. It doesn't have a big impact on the overall. Similarly with primary production, 128 be less than $10, and some might only be $1 or so. So they probably wouldn't apply. But one of the things I particularly wanted to show you though is that I really didn't expect at all was, and suggest to me that maybe there's a different tactic, is what's happening within the industrial stuff and what's happening with the commercial stuff. So you can see that very little valuation change for most. So virtually all below that 10% relative to what's happening with residential and primary production. Over 10% still a substantial change in terms of history, but not relative to what's going on elsewhere. And the commercial even less so. Very few over here outside of that increase. I hope that paints a reasonable picture for the challenges that you face in trying to be equitable in this rate setting process. Originally, this table showed what would happen under option 1. And I think we quickly moved off to option 1 because I'm pretty sure that we didn't want to see 12.8% increases in revenue. We moved quickly to the concept of option 2, And when we did the exact calculations for the revenue, this is what got me thinking about, well, maybe we have to think about this a little bit differently. Because what was happening with option 2, and this is to reduce the rate of the dollar so that you've got that 3% increase in rate revenue. What's happening is that you're actually getting reductions in rate revenue from some land use codes because their valuations aren't going up equal to the amount that we'd be reducing the rate revenue. So actually getting less revenue. So you'd be giving people rate notices and saying we're going to be paying less because relatively your valuations haven't gone up. And that's mainly happening in that commercial other and that industry other space. And there's some quite significant size assessment values in that space, so it has an impact overall. So one of the things that I wanted you to consider, taking into account some of the things I've said, is that is there an option 2B, not 2B or not to be, but option 2B, maybe it is not to be, whether we should be looking at trying to maintain the amount of revenue from each land use category. And that 3.4% that I've included here would be allowing for a net 3% increase and then funding the a 10% or thereabouts rebate. So the only way you could do that is if you change the differential ratios. So at the moment, for instance, that I've got them on the next slide. So I'll just go back and go to the top and say, based on the criteria that you're applying for rebates, maybe you should consider whether we only provide that for the residential and the primary production, because if you're going for 10%, relatively meaningless for the other categories. So there'd be applications from people, and there'd be very little they'd actually get back from it. As I said, to achieve that, not necessarily change the revenue. That would require the differential ratios to change. So industry other would be 2.75 to 3, and commercial would be 2 to 2.2, but all the others would change to some extent to achieve that status in the amount of revenue from those ratepayers. And on top of that, all these calculations were made based on the valuation, excluding real change, so additional properties. So factored into that 3.4% or thereabouts is also the real increases in revenue. You're currently looking at about 40,000 additional rates from residential property, 80,000 from vacant land, 40,000 from commercial. I can't quite work out primary production new at the moment because there's been a number of new assessments created. So they split an assessment and change the assessment around, but they're not necessarily new assessments. So I wouldn't be including them as new growth as such. And this is probably the final part of it, if you see any sense in what I'm saying about that top point, about possibly limiting the rebate to some, and maybe modifying the rate in the dollars to achieve the same level of revenue that you've achieved before from each land use category. Now might be a good time to give me that signal. If you're against it, that would be good. I won't have to change anything. But if you like some of these points, well, maybe I'd be very interested in hearing what your views are.
Thank you so much, Nigel. Look, I might just, I don't think we need to suspend standing orders. Might just open up some questions. You prepared to take some questions, Nigel? Mr. Dean?
That last one you put up, are you still assuming the rebate for massive, well, any valuation increase over 10% or not? Yes, because I think that's an absolute necessary safeguard. Looking at your adjustment of the multiplying rates for industry other and commercial other, they're already higher than most councils around us, and putting them up a bit more is probably going the opposite direction, perhaps, to what our discussions were when we were looking at rating policy last year. So that's a little of a question mark I've got about that particular approach.
Thank you, councillor Dean. Any response to that, Nigel, or you just take that one on?
We agree. As I said, the ratio brings in the same amount of revenue, so it's not an actual increase as such to those ratepayers. I suppose we like to slide in there that all those ratepayers are also entitled to tax deductions, which most residential ratepayers aren't. But no, I agree that certainly the ratios are high compared to some other areas.
Councillor Michael?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor Bill. Thanks, Nigel. I had a couple of questions actually that probably go back to the CEO's presentation as well. So bear with me. The economic development plan, I'll get to rates in a minute, but I'll just do this all at once. The economic development plan seems to be based on figures that are about 40 years old, and that's very COVID heavy. Is there a plan to revisit that anytime soon?
Yeah, through the chair. So as part of our medium-term program, we're going to revisit that in the next couple of years. So I think we'd had looked at doing that, not this particular financial year, but year 2. That can be brought forward potentially.
Yeah, my personal view is I think it should. I don't think we need to go external to do that, but it feels like the information's a little bit dated. I mean, a lot of things have changed, as we all know, over the last couple of years. You know, so I think it's probably a conversation for another meeting, but thank you for that. So look, I made the same observations as Councillor Dean in respect of the rates for commercial and industrial property seem significantly higher in this council area, and I just wonder whether or not that's a good thing, and further to that, whether or not applying a further a further increase is sending the right message to people who may have an interest in development in this council area or those sorts of properties. I had a question about how much of the grant funding could be at risk. It's a difficult question to answer, but just in light of some announcements by the federal government recently, and whether or not we think there's any, if we're able to bookend what we think, what we're relying on, I suppose, and how how that might present any risk to our capital asset program. I'm almost there. Nigel, you noted a capital works increase of 34%, up from $4.41 million to 5.92. At page 30 of the business plan, though, I note that the current financial year had expenditure of just under 4. Next year's 4.488, rising to 6 million in 2025, which I think was a subject to my email the other day. And then, interestingly, it decreases in 2026. So I wasn't quite sure how that 34% It could be just me misinterpreting the figures. In respect to the rating options, my question was whether option 2B provides an overall increase in council revenue as compared to option 3. And my final question is, what is the cost of this rebate that we're considering at the moment? That's it.
Thank you, Councillor Michael.
I might jump in and answer the questions on the grant funding as a starting point. And the aim is around, I think, just over $1 million per year in grant funding that we would be looking to try and get in. In fairness, it is a figure that is over the longer term rather than on each individual year. So when it comes to each individual year, we need to look at it and go, will we get 1.4 million in grant funding? And certainly for this year, we've just submitted an application today that would be for 1.4 million in grant funding, in addition to council's $700,000 contribution. So we would be relatively confident that that will be a high-ranking project within the broader mix across the Legatus area. So we would be confident that we would get that money come through.
Thank you, Richard.
Mr. Mayor, can I just, if we're going to talk about option 2B, can we go back to that slide, please?
%34 increase was just 23, 24. The asset management plan recommends certain things be done in certain years, so it's not even. The cost of the rate rebate in the assumption that's in the business plan is estimated at 300,000. That is dependent on people applying. I think, as we've discussed before, we'll do our utmost to encourage people to do that. I'd imagine there's probably a lot of the lower end, probably just one. So that takes that into account based on the experience. That's it for me at the moment.
Yeah, so the final, yeah, that's most of it. Thank you. So my comment, the commercial and industrial property was really only a comment. So then, yeah, my question on 2B is, does that represent an overall increase in revenue, in rate revenue next financial year when compared with the base option 2? Because it looks like it does, very quickly reading the table. So would that result in a net increase in revenue for council next year?
Well, it's a good question, and maybe it's something we need to explore in terms of what would we do the next year. If there's another extraordinary valuation change, maybe we'd be reverting back to the previous ratios. But the way it's calculated is that there isn't additional revenue compared to the option that's in the business plan. It's a zero sum calculation. We're just working out what the budget needs to fund.
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying is, if I look at the change column in 2B, those figures roughly add up to around $700,000, whereas the change column in base option 2 must be 350, 200, say call it $500,000. But to me, that there appears to be more change in option 2B than option 2.
Shouldn't be. I'd go back and have a look at the model.
Yeah, that's okay.
It was really about talking about the concept of whether a different approach
Yeah, no, I appreciate that.
be-
Just trying to get
would
my
be
head around
useful.
What impact it has on the overall thing. Thanks.
Yeah, just a quick question. I'm taking your point a little further in relation to the industrial and commercial rate. Is there any way that we could revisit that? I mean, I believe that we should be seriously looking at that if we're trying to encourage major business to our region, if that can be a major impediment, is it, by revisiting that, would it have a major impact on the rest of what we're talking about tonight? Excuse me? That's what I mean. We don't, I'm following what Councillor Michael said. It seems like it's a little bit high.
I'm not suggesting the revenue increases. I'm suggesting the revenue stays at the same relativity as everybody else's, every other category increase. So that the ratepayers wouldn't see anything different to any other ratepayer in that setting. Now, the important question is what Michael raised, and that is what happens in the next year, depending on what happens with valuation changes. It probably would be appropriate to revert the ratios where they came from. Probably a little bit too late in the piece for us to be trying to review the overall situation at this stage. I suppose my impression is that our commercial industrial ratepayers are very, very good payers. We hear very, very little
Yes.
from
I've
those
heard
areas.
a few complaints.
Okay,
But that's the average of the total amount will be the same, but the averages will change, won't it? So individual commercial owners will be paying, some may be paying a lot more than 3% and vice versa because of their different valuations. So the total will be the same, but each individual could be incurring.
I should go and have a look at each individual one and give you that information if there's some interest in considering that. And also we need to factor in, well, what's the impact of the 10%? So if they go up 10%, well, then it's basically a zero-sum game.
Well, do we need to allow the commercial and other ratepayers to access to that 10% rebate? At the moment, that's one of your comments there, was not to allow them. Should we allow them? I mean,
Well, that's the question. That's the question to you.
At least it makes it easier. I mean, it's 300,000 in total. It's not a great deal of money, really.
Yeah, Councillor Lim?
I just wondered whether you have, Nigel, had a look at the rates in Barossa and Gawler on commercial and those two ones that we've been looking at. Have you got any comparison in rates as to what they are charging on on the other side of our boundaries? That's industrial and commercial.
Only those tables I had up previously, and of course they're averages, which can be dangerous. Sorry, Barossa and
Gawler.
So Barossa. Sorry, who are we talking about in commercial
Yes.
industrial? So looks like the commercial is 1.5 for all compared to $1.752, 2.75. This is in the 22-23 year. Yeah. The goal at 2.17. Interesting number. Blayford's interesting. 627. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Nigel. Further questions, councillors? Councillor Collins?
You had a table earlier about the financial total assessments. Using the same figures that you're using in the annual business plan. Have you got that?
These numbers.
Yeah.
So these numbers are the 22-23 year, because I don't have the comparison.
The total assessment, you had a thing up there earlier in one of your slides, didn't you?
Can't remember what it was. 8, 7, something or other.
No, I just thought the primary reduction was different on this because it's 13, it's 12.5% increase here. And I thought it was less on the one you had, but this is the one that we're going to put out to the public. I'm looking at, and the figure's different. That's
When we did, is it dramatically different? Because when we did that, it would have been based on the earlier
well,
valuation.
this is as week 43. So what are we doing now?
44. But originally the annual business plan would have been on 41. Week 41.
And then it says prime reductions only go 0.278 increase. Oh, that's between 23 and 24. And then this year it's going up how much? As a percentage. So you don't sound like so the percentage from next year or from 23 to 24 is 2.78 for, but I thought we were saying it's more than that for prime reduction.
So that number, that would be 2.78.
Oh, okay.
Thank you, Nigel. Any further questions, councillors?
Just through the chair, I think there was a comment about the commercial industrial and having rates that may attract people to our area. Roseworthy and the Kingsford area has a significant amount of employment lands that would most likely fall into one of those categories once it's developed and done. So right at this point, we are talking about our existing rate payers. But through our economic development team, there may be, other negotiations, rate holidays or incentives that may be considered at that time to attract people to our area. And I mean, as an example, that was done with Aurora, Amcor back in the day, where significant incentives were done. But, once that business is established and is here, and obviously, starting to make, a reasonable sort of revenue, they then return to the standard rating.
Thanks very much, Richard. That gives us some insight and also gives us something to look forward to in the future because we really do want to encourage that economic development. Thanks, Councillor Dean.
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Taking up the point that Councillor Bill made about the rebate for valuations in excess of 10%. I think last year when we were talking about this, we thought it was fair to provide that to everyone. I'm just wondering why you're suggesting just residential and primary production rather than uniformly across everyone, because I think that is a fairness principle that you'd want to think carefully about before you overthrow.
Along with the pictures. That one. It mainly came to me because of this situation. They're virtually all 10% now. And similarly, that's why I think the cutoff is probably pretty relevant in residential at 10%. It probably seems to be a fair thing to conclude that there is probably a not extreme volatility in terms of what's suggested in the Act. This is the extreme volatility. Here, probably not a lot of evidence for volatility and not a lot of evidence for volatility in the commercial.
Given that the impact on our rate income will be minimal consequently, it seems to me sensible to keep the principle of fairness in, and a lot of them may choose not to apply for the rebate. It was only going to be a few dollars, but having it in there does continue with what we've considered to be a principle of fairness.
Yes, I'm not necessarily dying in the ditch over that proposition. I just thought it was important that I highlight to you that maybe that's something you should consider, but the fairness probably outweighs, I suppose, discounting those people at the high end. You'd get some positive reaction to.
Mr. Mayor, through you, can I ask a question? There's going to be quite a bit of commercial development in Freeling coming up. Do we offer a period where they don't have to pay the rates? We have done that before until next year. If a big building goes up and hopefully it'll go up by October, what do we do? We've done it in the past. I think we did it with Foodland. I'm not sure. Yes, we did. What did we do? Through you. The what?
Aurora, the bottle.
Yes, but that was a big one. Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, I guess each development's quite different, so we treat every development on its own merits on a case-by-case basis. So some developments are not seeking incentives, they're just going to move on, and they probably actually want council just to get out of the way so they can proceed with their developments. So our support for them is more about trying to facilitate and case manage their development applications, for example, but others might require some incentives if they're competing in terms of a location sense. So if we get approached by a developer that says, yeah, we can come into the area, but we're also looking at other locations, either in the region or within the state, we may offer or seek to propose incentives to secure them within our council area. So it's sort of it is a case-by-case situation, really. So we just seek to engage with developers as early as possible to understand their needs and work out what the best approach from council is.
Just on that, then, can the developer Carlo, can he apply for this building, medical building he's putting up? He's got a lot of approvals from council. Can he apply for that now?
In terms of incentives?
Yes, because he's got.
We are open to those conversations at any time.
You are?
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I,
Councillor Bill?
I'm pretty simple on this, and I want to know what you're going to be able to say in the newspaper. So you're going to be able to get out and say that our council is going to have a 3% increase in rates, and does that mean that's across the board? Does that mean everyone's going to, on average, get a 3%, or is that 3% once the valuation of your property's gone above the increase in the valuation of your property? I think because that's the question you're going to be asked.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that 3%? Is that it, or across the board, or are we looking at you? Yeah, is it? But is it your value of property's gone up, so you've got to take that on the chin, and then we'll give you 3% on top of that. I think
That's right. We've got to be open and honest.
Yeah, so perhaps tonight
And,
you can,
we need to
just
carefully.
for my simple mind.
Oh, no, it's not simple mind. I think it was a good question, and we're going to have to be very honest with people and craft our response carefully, because it might be 3%, but 3% of what? And that's the difference. And people's rates are going to go up, which they do every year in exactly the same way. We get exactly the same questions every year, because it's not 3% at all. It's 3% of the new value of your property. And that's not always clear when it's being reported. Just hang on a second, Dean, I haven't finished. It's not always clear when it's being reported by newspapers. So we're going to have to try and craft something around that we are absolutely upfront with our ratepayers, on the basis that what we've seen tonight is an excellent outcome, is an excellent result, given the financial situation that we find ourselves in with the valuations of properties and et cetera, to the extent that they've gone up. So we've got a good news story in lots of ways, but we've just got to be open and honest about the actual outcome and that 3%. So I agree with you totally, Councillor Bill. Councillor Dean?
I was just going to say, Mayor Bill, that it's quite difficult when you start talking about a 3% increase that you just described. I think if we work on the lines is that the general rate revenue increase, excluding new growth, is 3%. Then you avoid that other confusion that can occur, because some people's rates might go up 10%, but if the rate in the dollar has gone down significantly as it has, their actual rate increase might only be 2.2% or something of that nature. So it's worth having a rider in there, two things in there. I think one, saying that we've got a safety net. If your valuation goes up more than 10%, you can rebate, and make clear that whilst the average is 3%, and you can make the point that the valuations have varied wildly this year, and so individual ones will be different, but that's the average.
Yeah, the difficulty with that, and I agree with you totally, we've got to get it in about one paragraph.
Yeah.
Otherwise people just don't read it.
Mr. Mayor. I'm
Councillor-
sorry.
Councillor Collins, never mind.
What week are we at? What is the week?
44.
44. So there's could be an increase in rate revenue there still. By the time we get to the end of that.
In the current week, there are a number of assessments that have shifted from land to residential.
Yeah.
And forget the exact number, 50 or so, but it appears that the valuer general is still in the process because there was no new valuation on them. So I'm guessing it's probably the likes of Roseworthy, where they've probably prepared the valuation to be increased, but they haven't actually assessed it yet. So there's probably some more. Can't really guess how much. In recent years, it's been relatively small from this point, but the likes of Roseworthy, I'm guessing they're probably even doing a physical inspection to see what's actually happening there.
Through the chair, there's actually a lot of houses, new houses there, and when would they come online? They won't come online till after June, will they? For assessment, or will to be included in the rate revenue?
If there's anything other than, if there's anything other than vacant land, it will be assessed in some way. So there's the residential category has two components to it: finished house, house under development. So once that concrete slab goes down, that's
when it happens.
It starts to get more value. Won't probably make any difference other than the minimum. The rate revenue is an iterative process, but our requirement is that we're supposed to develop the budget, our expenditure proposal, and that then determines how much we should get from rate revenue. But it's very difficult, as it was particularly last year. We started out last year with this assumptions and had no idea what was going to be happening with the valuation. And we made certain assumptions and then got to the point where, well, we can't follow through on that assumption, otherwise there's going to be a lot of angry ratepayers. And we weren't actually spending all of the rate revenue that was going to be achieved by that assumption. So we tried to make it a bit smarter this year by being a bit more iterative and and assuming certain things about expenditure levels, but later probably refined and confirmed as we went through the budget process, but it's based upon a 3% increase in rate revenue. And as Councillor Dean has said, if the rate in the dollar comes down and if your property doesn't increase in value, you get a rate reduction. Even though we're getting 3% extra in revenue, it's coming from other people. And correct that you don't want to be saying everyone's going up 3%, because these people up here, they're not going up 3%. Yes, they'll benefit also from whatever we do with the change in the rate in the dollar, and they'll benefit from the 10%, but they're going to be paying a bigger increase than 3%.
Yeah, thank you, Nigel.
Protected by the 10%, but still going to be paying more than 3%.
Well, then wouldn't it be better to make it 5%? You're going to protect more people if you make it low, right? So where'd you get the 10% from? You just pluck that out of your hat.
Sorry, I didn't quite.
Why'd you pick 10%? Because that's what you used last year, or like, why couldn't we just make it 5%?
So what is the science behind where the 10% lies? To be honest, it's related to the Act in protecting the high volatility, but supporting the revenue base as well. So if you get an extraordinarily low maximum increase, it's going to result in changes in the rate in the dollar. So it will change the revenue mix. If we go back and look at similar charts to these last year, we had some very unusual blips. It was like particularly in the residential, that someone at the Valuer General had coded virtually everything either at an 8% increase in value or an 11% increase in value. Well, it was actually, 11 to 14%. So if we'd gone above the 11% rebate, it would have been a massive reduction in rate revenue. So that basically what set the 11, what set the 10, to be perfectly honest, it was a nice round number. And then the charts came along and I think probably confirmed that it's around about the mark in terms of what the Act says about protecting the high volatility.
Yeah, but last year I was talking to a lot of people who paid rates and who got the rebate, but the rebate, because as you said, a lot of it was around 11%, so the rebate at 1% was hardly worth doing. So if you're sitting at very high, close to the mark, then it's a lot of them, you know, you're going to have all these people, or what, so you're going to be 598, you're going to be less than $10. Then there's going to be a lot then there's probably going to be 1,000 that are less than 50. You know, it's not a lot. So why don't you just drop it to 5% and you know, make it a decent rebate for someone, because it's
Same answer. It's going to significantly reduce your revenue.
Councillor Dean?
If you look at those graph up there, if you make it 5%, you're giving so many people a rebate that you're just about giving everyone a rebate. And a more efficient way to do that, instead of working out all these rebates, is simply to have a larger rate in the dollar reduction, which is what we've done, and then have the rebate line somewhere where you can see from the graphs, it's the logical place to put it, that you get a sum above, it's a manageable number, but the bulk of people get their reduction or compensation for the valuation by means of a reduction in the rate in the dollar.
yeah, I agree, and that's where I was actually heading. I was going to go whatever his rate, get rid of the rebate scheme and just drop the rate in the dollar. That's who I was leading to, because I think the rebate scheme is, a lot of people tried to get it and it was just so close that it's, so I think we should be trying to drop the rate of the dollar and actually get less rate revenue. And I don't care if it's 3% and we're lower than everyone else. I think we've got a spending problem personally. I think we could cut spending in quite a few areas and not look at getting this revenue. That's my opinion on what's going on there.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. Any further questions, councillors? Councillor Simon?
Through the chair, I was thinking about, the whole time now we're talking about the rate income, the revenue side of things, but we haven't really talked about the spending side of things. So I hope that we're going to go there, and I'm sort of with Colin on this one, that maybe that's where we can look at to keep those increases down.
Look, through the chair, I might just sort of wrap the presentation up with the summary. So obviously key theme, small operating surplus. I think that is, I think we've done, pretty well in terms of looking at the expenses before they've been presented to the elected members, and obviously being very cautious around the revenue to get that operating surplus. I think, the rate rise overall is quite modest, as Nigel has said, amongst other councils. And I think from that point of view, again, we should be, quite pleased with that. Impact of the Reserve Bank has already been factored in. So I think, again, that was a really good assumption that was built into the budget. So that 0.25% that we got today has obviously already eroded, or I shouldn't say eroded, but it has eroded part of the assumption that is there. Key thing is in relation to expenses, and I think I've mentioned all of the services that council do provide. We will, the budget has been established to continue to provide those services that the community, I suppose, not only want, but as we can see by the statistics, the community are using those services. We think it's pretty balanced. Again, those services, are quite varied, and I think we've gone through the different community services, the infrastructure services, and again, I think there's something in it for everyone. We think it's a very responsible budget. I think we're listening to the community, and I think we're reading the tea leaves in relation to the cost of living pressures that impact on a lot of our community. And I think it's very responsible budget that we've set. And over the longer term, we think that, having modest rises on an annual basis is a very sustainable way of setting our rates, rather than looking at spikes each year that might, go very high. As we say, that the CPI increases were much higher than what we've put out. We could have gone with that, but we've actually looked within and brought some savings from within prior to submitting the expenses to the elected members. So we think it's quite sustainable. I think that was my last point. Oh, and then just obviously leaving us with the recommendation that came to us via the audit committee from last night. So thank you.
Thanks very much, Richard, and thank you, Nigel. Also, I think you provided us with an excellent snapshot of where we're at, how we compare with our neighbouring councils, and a budget that is achievable and workable, and not a huge impost on the majority of our ratepayers. Hopefully, we can deliver that and hopefully achieve all of the objectives that are currently in the business plan. We've got a series of recommendations from or one of the top recommendation for the Audit and Risk Committee meeting of last night. And the recommendation at the top says that the agenda, reports and minutes of that meeting of the Light Regional Council Audit and Risk Committee held on Monday, the 1st of May, be received. Would someone like to move that? Thanks, Councillor Lynn. Someone like to second that? Councillor Fabio, all those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Councillors, are there anything you'd like to withdraw from that particular list of recommendations? Not, I'll put the recommendations. All those in favour?
So we got this recommendation. This is the Audit and Risk Committee thing from last night.
Yeah, this is from last night.
I haven't even looked at this. I've been at work all day and I'm finding this all been pushed on me a bit too fast. I've got the, all the stuff on Thursday. You know, I've been working all day. I haven't looked at it. So I don't want to pass it. I just can't see how we can,
Well, basically, it's talking about what we talked about tonight. That's what they went through last night.
I haven't read the minutes, so I haven't seen the minutes. So anyway, can you just pass things without seeing them, can you? I haven't got,
Well, look, there's,
what time did they come out today?
I don't know what time they came out, but they came out today.
Yeah, they got emailed at about 3 o'clock, I think, so. Yeah,
Well, there's one specific recommendation there that talks about receives a note the report titled Budget Review, Revised Forecast as of the 31st of May and Company Financial Report. And second, pursuant to regulations, etc. And that was carried last night. And that's what we've been discussing.
Yeah, but even all the minutes that were like the minutes that came with that, what day they came on Thursday. So I've read a lot. I've read some of it. I haven't had time to read all this stuff. I just can't see how I'm expected as a councillor to get stuff on a Thursday and then pass a lot of this stuff on a Tuesday meeting. I just find it it's the whole budget we're talking about. It just seems a little bit too rushed to me. And I just wonder if we could have an extension on some of this stuff for another week maybe or something, because it's.
Councillor Simon?
Yeah, I do want to withdraw number 2, and I sort of concur as well. I mean, that's why I've been asking for these numbers a lot longer. We really, I mean, I need more time. I'm not the smartest guy in the room, so I probably need some more time to really digest the numbers. The other thing, though, is what I do want to point out is that the recommendation from the Audit and Risk Committee, their role is not to look at how we spend this money, or are we going to spend it on roads, or are we going to spend it on employees, are we going to any of this stuff. They're not interested in that at all. So their recommendation is saying that the way this budget looks, it's financially sustainable, it ticks all the boxes, the governance boxes, it's according to the Act. They're looking at all these sort of things.
That's their role.
That is their role. So their recommendation there does not say our spending, what we're spending this on is okay.
It's not their job.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm trying to point out. So the recommendation here, that's why I definitely want to pull it up, because this just recommends, yeah, the budget looks legal and according to the rules and everything else. But the discussion of should we spend more money on roads? Should we spend less money on roads? Should we spend more money on economic development? Should we other sort of stuff? This discussion we haven't had, and that's a discussion, and that's why I asked for these numbers originally, and I've only had them for about 6 days. I'm not.
We have
I don't have
this budget before.
No. But those numbers that I've asked for, and it took a while for me to get them, or for all of us to get them, I haven't been able to digest them properly, and so I'm not informed enough tonight to make this decision to say, like, this is good for public consultation. So that's my point. So I won't be able to support it. That's why I pull it out, and maybe we can discuss it right now.
Fine. Do I have any comment from anywhere else? Councillor Dean?
I think that we've known what that recommendation was going to be from quite a while ago. We were told that we would be asked to pass the draft budget for public consultation, and the spreadsheets and so on were sent out to enable people to ask questions if they wanted to. Tonight we've had a very good summary of all the different services the council provides, and the strategies and policies and whatnot that and the legislation we have to abide by when we deliver the services. So I think we have all the information that we need. You may not think that some of those services ought to be delivered, but we can't at the last 11th hour, as it were, say, oh, we're not going to fund that. That needs to go via a process like, for example, change our strategies in our strategy that plan that we're going to work on shortly. So personally, I'm happy to vote on that now. The only other way, if someone doesn't want to vote on it now, would be to vote to have it lay on the table till the special meeting next week or something of that nature and see with that.
Happy to
gets
move a
support.
motion, councillor Dean? You happy to move a motion?
I'm happy to move tonight, so if you don't want to move tonight, then they can move it.
Can I just ask a question? When was this supplementary agenda put on the website?
And through the chair at 11:15 this morning.
Yeah, 11:15 this morning, I was, I've got a job, so I just haven't had time to look at this. So, and I actually didn't even know it was here. I was looking at the old agenda, that's why I couldn't find it. So I didn't, it just seems we're getting pushed too quickly into something which is a big decision, and to expect someone who's fully employed to get at 11 o'clock, read it, come and read the recommendations, get here and then make a decision. I just don't think it's realistic.
Just through the chair, just to probably provide some clarification in case anyone is confused over it, and I absolutely get that people may be. The recommendations that we've got is that the audit committee and the audit committee agenda that went out last week simply has flowed through to council. So the audit committee last night has received that. So in terms of the audit committee agenda, that is effectively what is being considered. Between last night when the audit committee saw it and today, the only thing the audit committee has actually done is passed or moved the recommendation and adopted it last night. The key thing here is this is about the public consultation as well. So we're certainly not adopting the budget tonight, although as a general guide, what we go to public consultation with should be quite close to what we're prepared to adopt later in June. The purpose of tonight's presentation was to highlight to elected members the services that will be provided for the expenses. And I think that the presentation from Nigel around the manner in which we raise rates and the difficulties behind that, I think have hopefully enlightened everybody in terms of the difficulties around that. But in terms of the overall rating income, in terms of the overall expenses, the difference between that and the long-term financial plan is very marginal, I would say. So we aren't looking, we're not receiving a plan that is different to than what we should have expected.
Further questions, council? Thanks, Richard, for that. This recommendation here, though, doesn't address this budget tonight going out for public consultation. I think that's the key to what we're talking about here. This is not adopting the budget as per se. This is presenting the budget to council tonight to go out for public consultation for the 28-day period. And that should be part of the recommendation.
Yeah, but I think it should be adjusted though. There's a few things in that in the annual business plan that need to be changed.
Within that 21-day period when it's out there, that's when those.
Well, if you're going to publish, but you're going to publish things that are factually wrong. So the way I read this, so we're recommending that the annual business plan goes out.
That's correct.
Right. Or I'd like to go through the annual business plan because I think there's a few things that are wrong in it. I think you're using figures that are very old when it comes to the agricultural thing. Last year you got the granic oval, the granic nets in it. This year you've got them again, there's a few little things that, as a council, I wouldn't be happy with them actually being published the way it is. So, yeah, I'm not, it shouldn't be published in its current
Would
form.
you like it to move the motion, councillor?
Can I?
I'm getting mixed messages there. Yeah, would you like to move a motion, councillor Collins?
Already been moved by council.
Oh. Councillor Collins, councillor Dean has already moved the motion. I don't know if it.
I don't move the motion, but I'm happy to move the motion.
Oh, okay.
Excuse me. So Chair, didn't you asked to move this motion, before we move this motion, does anybody want to withdraw one of those items? And I said, I want to withdraw this item, so I don't think there's any discussion about this. I'm withdrawing this item. You guys can move the motion without this item in, and I'm happy to move and second, and we pass that. But that item is withdrawn, and we will be talking about it.
Okay. So. Let's get the motion up there correct as it should be. Council approve the draft budget and your business plan. Can't read that, it's got a thing in front of it.
Through the chair, the motion is that the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Audit and Risk Committee meeting held the 1st of May, numbered 1 through to 3, because we have removed item 2. That is the recommendation. 1, 2, 3. So number 1 to 3. Because item 2 has been removed as per the request of Councillor Simon.
Goodness me. So we've removed item 2, have we?
So it's actually renumbered, so it will be renumbered in the books.
Okay, so what are we talking about now?
Yeah, so basically we're doing that. That and that.
But it doesn't say anywhere there about
But
the
that's
consultation.
Yeah, no, that item there, we've removed altogether, so we'll discuss that separately. Yeah, does that make sense?
Yep.
So let's not carry to. Just accept what she's done there.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Just 1 and 3. You've got 1 to 3 because that may includes number 2. Yeah.
Citizen value referring to them as ARC 6.1.
Because it will be. Yeah, so recognition.
We get it.
So.
Well, I need a mover and second.
So I think Councillor Dean.
Councillor Dean?
Mayor Bill, I understand item 2 has been withdrawn.
That's
That
correct.
leaves item 1 and 3. I'm happy to move recommendation 2, which would then be amended to the reports and recommendations of the meeting of the Light Regional Council Audit and Risk Committee meeting held 1st of May 2023, numbered 1 and 3, as listed below, be adopted.
Just through the chair, just in terms of the way in which the program works, it has renumbered them. So when the minutes come out, it will show item 1, 2, and 3, but it will show that as agenda item 6.1, 6.3, and 6.4, with item 6.2 removed for discussion once we've adopted these items. Okay, everyone.
That's what I meant.
Sorry, it's a complexity with the program.
Sorry, I was looking at the number on the left, not the ARC 6.1. So whatever the appropriate
Happy to move that.
numbering is, I've moved it.
Thanks, Councillor Dean. Now I need someone to second that. Councillor Simon. All those in favour? Those against? Yeah, we had Councillor Simon. Okay, so we're left with, that's carried by the way, councillors, but we're left with item 2. From last night's Audit and Risk Committee. Now what are the answers? Don't know, yeah. Because this doesn't say anything about presentation. The recommendation, councillors, is on the screen. It's not on my running sheet. That's why I'm getting a bit confused. So the recommendation that is up on the screen now is open for discussion, or for someone like to move a motion in that regard. Councillor Simon.
I would like to make a comment to start with, I suppose. We've been told many times now that the way to do this whole budget thing is that we first set a price, or like an amount of money that we need to run our organization efficiently and deliver all the services that we want and need. And then following from that number, we then set our rates accordingly to generate that income. That's a change, I suppose, that's happened a few years back. That this is how we need to do it. So my first question, therefore, is where does the number of whatever it is, $22,787,000 come from? Because that's the number that we then backwards, as Nigel did, figured out how we're going to create that money. But how do we come up with that number? Because I personally disagree with that number. I think this number should and could be lower without cutting any services or anything. So this the question: where does that number come from?
Nigel, are you able to assist with that, please?
Thanks, Mayor Bill. Councillor, the number comes from our management preparing the best estimates to deliver the services. We've estimated what the costs are. We do go through an iterative process because we previously advised you that we would prepare an overall budget that wouldn't allow for a rate revenue increase greater than net 3%, which we have achieved. Now those estimates have been prepared based upon management preparing their submissions, and unlike any other organisation, the management invariably has all sorts of requests for improving services and delivery. But we then go through many rounds of reducing those expenditures until we come back with the estimates and prepared in the business plan that do not exceed a requirement of revenue more than rate revenue more than 3%.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor. Thank you, Nigel. Further questions, councillors?
Thanks, Mayor Bill, through the
Allison?
chair. I'm just interested to know when we look at that budget for the expenditure, when we can go through that and have a look at some of the services, etc., that we're offering, because there may be some money areas there that we can cut back on.
Nigel?
Councillor, the local government accounting regulations, financial management regulations requires me to prepare this budget in this format. The expenditure as laid out in there complies with the chart of accounts. That is your budget. Any detail below that are management workings. This is what you're required to review under the Act.
Thank you, Nigel. Any further questions, councillors?
So if we're to cut any spending, so that's beyond, that's gone, is it? And the opportunity for us to have any contribution into um, suggesting less money being spent in some areas and more money spent in others. Is that gone, that opportunity?
No, those opportunities aren't gone. I think we're waiting to hear what service adjustments you're looking for.
We were just about to pass the annual business plan that was go to the public, and we haven't got an opportunity to do that. So why, if we're going to pass it to go to the public, when was the opportunity going to arise for us to do that?
I think, as Nigel said, that the budget has been prepared based on our current service standards and service levels that we offer. We're open to hearing if there's changes in service standards that the elected body are looking for. Through the budget process, through the development of business cases, that information hasn't come forward for us to assess. So what has come through is the current service standards that this council has provided, and the budget has been developed on that. But
I think Simon's been asking a lot of questions, and so have I. I've been asking questions about, I wanted a breakdown in the wage, for each department. I wanted that. I haven't been supplied that because I just want to know, there's a few things I'm not that happy with. If you compare our council to others, we've got 5 managers on 200K. A lot of other adjoining councils and smaller councils haven't got that level of highly paid management. And also, I don't think there seems to be a lot of management which is high, even below that. There's management that's getting that sort of 120 mark, which we seem to have a lot more of them than other councils. I think there is savings to be had, and I think we're a bit over managed in the top level of management. And I want to know how we can adjust that, and if we can before this budget, or whether it's a long-term plan, whether you can't make savings anywhere. There's other things you can look at as well. There's the amount of money. Say, I know you say economic development's a bit of a baby of yours, but there's $750,000 spent in wages just in that, and then also another 150 or 200 is going to be spent in consultancy. That seems a lot of money. Like, we've spent a lot of money on these consultants. So Droves Encounter, I said there's nothing in the future budget for that. So obviously that's going to die a slow death, is it? Or that's going to come good? I don't know. The other thing, we're talking about, we're going to have a workshop for the railway precinct. We're going to go down and have a good crack at that. But then you go back through a lot of planning. Baggett, and who's Baggett, and who's they've done a lot of work there. Hewitt and Howe, I think, was the other one. So there's already been done a lot of work done on that, and here we are going to spend more money, more time on it. I just think there's a lot of duplication and savings that in this whole budget, which I don't think I've had an opportunity really to have any input in. That's the way I sort of feel. But and as Simon was asking for all these things a lot earlier and not getting them, and then we come here and we got to pass, or nearly had to pass something that was, I don't think I've had any input in it really.
Councillor Fabio.
Through the mayor, my view is that we're starting to get down into what I would almost consider micromanagement. I believe.
Yeah, I don't think that was.
No, I don't think that was called for. I did preface that by saying it was my view. I think I'm entitled to my opinion.
It was out of order, Colin.
I believe, being involved in a large organisation myself, where we're almost aiming towards this micromanagement level, we have to have some level of assurity, absolutely, from the department managers. That suggests that they are seeking out the best tenders, gathering the best prices and getting best bang for bucks in order to deliver the services that they do deliver. I believe that, absolutely there could be a redistribution of funds within the budget from one department to another. However, I think as a starting point of where we're at in regards to setting the rates based on, like Simon mentioned, working backwards of saying, okay, well, this is the level of service that we want to deliver. Where are our rates and where we need to be? I think we've pretty much hit the nail on the head. And I believe the presentation that Nigel gave tonight certainly gives me that level of assurity. Our level of service, I believe, being present, as in the public gallery over a number of years, I believe the level of service that paid council staff are actually delivering has somewhat been impeded by what I feel to be sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes an unnecessary level of questioning. And I believe that that is impeding on their ability to perform and to move forward and do the job which, quite rightly so, we are paying them to do. That's my opinion, whether you agree or not, but unfortunately, that's the way I see it.
Thanks so much for that, Councillor Fabio. That obviously came from the heart, and you expelled a number of facts that I think we all need to listen to and take notice of. Which, yes.
My apologies, because I don't think I answered Councillor Collins' question that came to me then. But I think in terms of what Councillor Fabio has equally said, I can answer it by saying the $10.5 million in employee costs, which we would expect to have for 23-24, are the sort of costs that will enable us to deliver the services. The structure of employees will look different to what it currently has, but obviously we are at the point right now where I have just been appointed. I haven't determined what the general management structure will look like. And once that general management structure has been put in place, those general managers will equally have a careful look at what their management structure looks like to deliver the services. I'm comfortable that $10.5 million gives the flexibility to the administration to deliver those services. But equally, what I will say is I'm yet to hear and I'm yet to see in writing what those services are or what the elected members are looking for from those services. So I'm certainly keen to hear if it's, and I'll give an example. Hearing that, whether it be the cost of the library or the cost of economic development, I'm aware that elected members have been elected based on a platform that they might like. The presentation tonight focused on a number of items, one of which was 1,200 kilometres a year of patrol grading by 2 graders. I think it's a really simple service level. If we don't believe that 1,200 kilometres, and if staff haven't explained how that 1,200 kilometres will be delivered, if you're of the opinion that that service level is underneath where it should be, then, and that service level is at odds with our asset management plan, then my view is that sort of information needs to come to us so that staff can properly cost out what those services would be and bring them back to the chamber. Now, we're aware that there's been commentary, but we're looking for that formal approach, and I don't think that has been forthcoming. And that's just one item. So if there are items like that, I think the staff would be very keen to hear them in the business case format so we can properly bring them back to the chamber and everyone can see what that service standard would be.
Thank you, Richard. Any further comments? Councillor Michael?
Thank you, Councillor Reid. It might have been before me, Mayor Bill, but I'll go after if that's all.
Just a very brief comment to Richard. I actually did send in around an email which talked about service levels where I thought there could be improvement in infrastructure and roads and that, which I think was taken into account to some extent with this budget. So I did actually go through that process that you asked for that, and I gave it.
And I'd mention that, oh, sorry.
Excuse me. Councillor Michael?
Thanks, Mayor Bill and Councillor Dean. I guess just to, for my 2 cents worth here, I think just to comment on the process, because I think there was maybe a bit of confusion about it. I agree that the discussion around the Audit and Risk Committee, the role was to put forward a recommendation, and the staff and have put together a budget based on some parameters that were discussed in that workshop. And so I think, that's where that figure of 22.4 or whatever it is has come from. And so I think the opportunity, what we're being asked to do here is then to consider that recommendation, and that becomes the opportunity for, I guess, the debate that we're sort of having at the moment. But I will say this much: I do think there's something to be said on how that process works, because I do feel it's a little bit clunky. Like, I know we're asked to provide the business cases. I probably wasn't right across the process at that point. And, I think we've spoken about an opportunity to be a bit more collaborative as a group in a more informal setting that says, right, well, what are the priorities in each ward, whether it's sealed roads, whether it's treating roads, whether it's broken curbs, whatever it might be. So I think that's a process that can be improved, and that's something that I've discussed with some people here. So that said, from my perspective, the priorities for this council should be infrastructure, and keeping rates at the moment as low as they can. On that, I'd make a comment that our rates, what we've been showing here is our rates are comparatively lower to some of our neighbours. And fundamentally, those rates are a function of the expenses and the budget that's been put together. But that said, I would be open to a proposition that says here's a notional challenge. I'm used to, a bit like Councillor Fabio, in the corporate environment, a bit of tension is good. Here's a bit of challenge, a dividend that we'd like to see realised, and challenge management and the staff to achieve that. And if they do, then it gets reprioritised into, in my view, capital works infrastructure. So I'd be open to a debate about that, discussion about that. That's really all I wanted to say.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Michael. That was well put, and I think we've always be open for a budget review. I think we have no issue with that. I think it's probably a policy that we should introduce and have those reviews probably more often than we do. Gives us a chance, particularly in a workshop environment, chance to have a look at some of these, drill down a little bit further and look at some of these matters that we've got there and how we're actually dealing with it, etc. I think that's what you were trying to get at.
Yeah.
I agree with you. Anything further, councillors? Councillor Collins?
So I did send you an email on the 23rd of April about this, about what you're suggesting about the roads, and I didn't think 25 million was enough. I said that in an email. I was also concerned about bringing because of 30% cost of bringing the limestone. So I had made you aware of that. I also did say that I don't believe economic development should be a high priority in this budget, and I gave some reasons for that, being that the economy is very strong. We're going to be competing for people to get things done, and I think is there another way? Maybe this email format is not the way we should be doing, or is there something else we should be doing?
Yeah, through I took them as comments from you in terms of a view that you had, rather than a request for a service change that you were looking for. So if I've misinterpreted that, I have.
Councillors, I'm not suggesting we're getting bogged down, but we probably do need to move on a little bit. We've got a motion up on the screen there that talks about the councillor Simon.
Can I move to have this laid on the table? Because I'm not really ready to adopt this budget to be put to public consultation for a few reasons. As Nigel correctly put it.
You have provided your reasons earlier.
Well, I'm not sure.
You would like to move the motion that you will lay on the table?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
until, next Tuesday. When we have another meeting.
That's enough? Would it?
Yeah, just to follow up that, Nigel, could you give us your views on if we didn't make a decision on what impact it would have on the budget process?
Thanks, Mayor Bill. One of the reasons why I put up the reminder of the key dates earlier on in my presentation. So under the Act, you've got a legal requirement to give the community a 21-day public consultation period. So if you delay consideration of this now, well, that will obviously put that back by the period until you do come to a decision, and we can give the community 21 days notice.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Nigel. We'll have a mover that the question lie on the table. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Peter. Would anyone like to talk to the motion? Councillor Simon?
Yes, I will. The reason for doing this is just, as we've been pointed out, this number has come about. I fully understand the national side of things, and I totally appreciate what he's done, and he's done an excellent job. The number that we're working on, though, as has been said, is being generated by the administration to a large degree. Again, excellent job. However, we really didn't have input, as Councillor Collin put out, in my opinion. And in no point am I trying to micromanage anything. I'm quite the opposite. I want to macromanage things. And this is our role. We're the directors of this company. That's what we need to do. We need to direct. So one thing, and that's why there's a few options. One option would be we could say, look, our employees increased from 75 full-time equivalent in 7 years ago to 101 today. So we could have a discussion about that. We could say all these figures there that we've been given, they're all round figures. Insurance, $710,000. You cannot tell me that it's actually $710,000. That's obviously an assumption. And if you put assumptions in these sort of figures, you always put high assumption in there. So we could, for example, easily cut 1% off every single line and save ourselves whatever, what is it, $227,000 or something, and that would be a percentage of the rate rise, and we would have 2% increase. Like there's options that we could have without cutting the services, finding efficiency, all this sort of stuff. We as elected members, as directors of this company, have never been asked these things. We never, in my opinion, never had the chance to actually get involved in that. I've never had. We've never talked about the employee numbers. We've never talked about those things I just said. So that's really the reason to lay it on the table. If there's actually going to do anything, if you just have the same session a week from now and have the same discussion, the same vote, it doesn't do anything really. So I'm a little bit ambivalent about moving this. I have moved it, but the reason for it would be is that we have some more input. That maybe people, if we had all these email chains, there's only about 2 or 3 people saying anything. Everybody else is silent. I don't get that. Why aren't more people getting involved in doing our jobs, which is directing this company? If we don't have any more discussion about this between now and next Tuesday, then it's absolutely pointless. But my wish, my naive wish probably is that maybe between now and then people get together and maybe say like, oh, maybe we could do this, we could do this, and actually direct this company the way we should.
We do have a seconder for that motion. I think Councillor Peter. Any further discussion on the motion? Do you want to put Councillor Peter's name up on the? So we have a mover and a seconder for the motion. Right. So I'll put the motion. All those in favour?
No.
Oh, okay. Councillor Fabio?
The proposed rate increase is quite modest compared to other councils. I believe that's been proven. Certain people have, and other people have spoken to that too. Certainly that gives us sufficient confidence to go ahead and at least put it out to the public as it is for public consultation and then gauge their level of feedback and make the appropriate changes at that point. If there seems to be a swing, towards, people wanting more tourism, for argument's sake, then we should, take that level of, we should take that on board. Likewise, if people want more roads or, things like that, footpaths done, then obviously that's our prerogative to then act on what our constituents are wanting from us as elected members. I think it goes without saying that with any budget, within that period that the budget is active, the emphasis should always be on continuous improvement, cost management and cost reduction. And that's obviously, the focus of anyone that's in a managerial position going forward. But personally, I think to put it out there in its current context is sufficient, and then basically react off the public's feedback.
Thanks, councillor Palmer.
Mr Mayor, I'd like to make a comment.
Sure.
I believe, I was thinking it would be before when Dean suggested it, or Councillor Dean suggested it lay on the table and come back to it next week. But after all the discussion that's gone on, if we go back to that, we're only going to be talking about tonight's presentation again. And I just feel it's a waste of time. I mean, they're bringing up, councillors are bringing up things that really don't sit with that. I think we need to just put it out to the public, and then after that's gone out, we can then, we've still got plenty of time to discuss all this. There's a lot more that can be done or changed in this period. We're not sitting in concrete. So that's my opinion.
Thanks, councillor Lynn. Councillor Michael.
I'll try and keep this brief. So a couple of questions on Councillor Simon's proposed motion, and then maybe a comment or a proposal. So my question would be, if we put it on the table and we come back next week, what are we, and I'm not being critical here, this is a question, what are we doing differently in that time so that when we come back here next week, to Councillor Lynn's point, we're not sitting here talking about the same thing, and I don't necessarily have the answer. But I think that's something we need to maybe resolve as part of it, whether there's an offline workshop or some other thing. I'm quite open to the idea of challenge with this. I think that's important. I agree with Councillor Simon and others that I do think it's our role as elected members to be challenging this. It's one of the most important functions that we have, and particularly this year. Obviously, interest rates up again today. People are looking to make savings in their own lives, and we should be looking to do the same thing. To that end, I guess something I've had some success with in the corporate world is to say, well, what if we, and I don't know if this is possible in a statutory context, if we said an notional saving of, say, 1% on total expenses, less depreciation, amortisation, impairment, and that 1% to be either reallocated to capital works or award projects, which doesn't seem to be on here. Is that a way forward potentially? Or otherwise, I am sympathetic to the idea of of pushing it back another week, as long as we're doing something different in between. Because if we're just going to come back here and do this again, then yeah.
Councillor Dean.
Question of Councillor Michael first. That means that you are looking at a redistribution of funds within the budget, not changing the overall budget amount, I gathered. And I just want to clarify a point from Councillor Lynn. I wasn't suggesting laying on the table. I was just saying that if someone didn't want to vote on it now, that's the way it will be done.
I think also what you're saying, Councillor Michael, that there's no reason why when it goes out for public consultation that we can't think about having another look at this budget and coming up with some concepts to save that 1% that you're talking about and whatever before it's adopted. We've got those 3 weeks that it's out there to do something in that respect, whether it be a workshop or whatever, because this is not adopting this budget. This is only just putting it out for public consultation and getting it out there, getting some other opinions. And then we distill those opinions because we've got to take notice of them. Otherwise, why do it? And maybe we'll have some opinions also by that stage to be able to put those on the table as well before we actually hit the hammer down and say, right, that's it. But I couldn't see the budget from a council perspective changing dramatically. There's going to be changes here and there and more focus probably in other areas with the council's views. Come forward a bit further with more investigation. But I think if we get it out there, we've still got that time to address all of the issues that have been raised. It gives people a chance to have another really good look at what's there, to have some thoughts on where you think savings could be made and how, and bring those back to the table before the budget's adopted, which probably would mean a workshop after the public consultation phase finishes, because there'll be obviously some changes to the budget and it'll need to be reworked to some degree as well. I think so. We've got to give the staff some opportunity to be able to do that because we've still got some regulatory requirements of getting it out by the end of 1st of June. Nigel, was it the 1st of June when we've got to have our budget and our rates notice adopted?
15th of August.
15th of August, that's the date. That's right.
Of course, every day that goes past is another day of uncertainty, so we can't get along with the program. So staff would certainly much prefer to know what it's exactly going to do from the 1st of July. While I've got the mic on, Mayor Bill, I'll probably respond to the councillor's challenge. Finance would be more than happy to accept that challenge. It was exactly that approach that we took last year. So the ward project funding came about as a consequence of us putting out that we would put $250,000, 1% of the budget in, and we would achieve that through the budget review process. I only respond because you do not have to change the budget to achieve that. Simply give us that instruction and we'll do it through the budget review process, and we'll go looking for further savings. Now, I'd still reiterate that we have been through that process. Andrew and I have scrounged over this budget looking for whatever we could find, because to keep the cost down to that 3% was a significant challenge. We've got electricity prices going through the roof. We've got construction costs going through the roof. You know what's happening with fuel. As the assumption said, we will build in those costs as what they're expected to do. There's no point in us hoping that fuel is going to come down in price, so those are factored in appropriately. We've achieved the savings elsewhere to bring it back to that 3%. That's why I was hoping for you to accept earlier what I'm saying to you, that this is a budget to be proud of.
Thanks very much. Councillor Collin.
Yeah, so I agree with Michael that if you go into a percentage thing, that was one of the reasons why I did ask Richard for a breakdown of each department by with wages, so that I could know which one, if we take some from one and to give to another. The other thing I'd like to say, I'd like to leave on the table. I only got this stuff on Thursday like everyone else. I haven't had time to read it all. I've read quite a bit of it, and then this thing came today at 3 o'clock or 11 o'clock, sorry, was it? I just don't feel comfortable that I'm, as an elected member who's elected, and I did run on changing things, and I think that was a strong community sentiment at the time. So they need to change. They think there's a lot of money spent on things that they don't find directly benefit the community.
Right.
So there are,
That's politics.
that is politics, and that's why we're here, Bill. And, you know, I got quite a number of votes. So I'm just sticking to what I ran on, and I'm quite strong in that. So, the other thing, there's a few little things that are wrong in the thing as well. Like there's, you know, the upgrade of the Greenwich Centenary Park cricket nets. You know, you had that in the last one. So, you know, you bring the next one, was it paid, you know, I don't really like the
Well, they
rules.
just got a state government grant, by the way.
Well, why do you have it in last year's as well as this year's?
Well, I don't know, but they just got a state government grant.
Well, just-
I read it in the paper.
It just makes it sort of a bit silly if you put it in one of the next one, but,
We're getting into the detail again, though, which is what we're trying to avoid at the moment. We've
what's
got
that?
an opportunity to get this out to our residents, get their thoughts, distill those with our own thoughts, come back, put the final touches to what we want, including the matters you raised, and rightly so. There's no problem with that. We're not trying to ignore you, but this is probably not the time to get down into the rabbit holes, into the fine detail of the budget, which we've been through and just been presented with.
I'm not talking about the budget. I'm just talking about what you're putting out to the public. But anyway, that's, I don't
Yeah.
understand. But anyway, that doesn't matter. But anyway, I don't feel comfortable. I've got a general or a strong enough grasp on everything that's in it. And I also would like to thank Richard for telling me what I'm meant to do. I thought this email correspondence was letting him know, or Richard know, and management, my opinion on things. Obviously, there's another way. I'm going to have to be more direct in my opinions. So I will be writing, you know, if I do think there are things to change after I've read it, I'll strongly, and if I've got a week to do that, I think that'd be great help.
Councillor Dean?
Mayor Bill, just a comment in response to something Councillor Collins said. It is actually not our responsibility at all to direct to the CEO where staff should be deployed. That is actually the CEO's responsibility. So it's no good us saying that should move someone from there to there. That's not our role. Just thought I'd make that clear.
I think if we're going to play the game, we ought to know the rules, and that is a CEO's task, is to allocate staff.
If you look at the legislation and the act and whatnot, you said looking at moving economic development people into another department. What'd you say then?
Anyway, let's move on, councillors. We are getting bogged down a little bit. I've got a motion up on the screen there. It's been moved and seconded.
Yeah,
Councillor
so
Simon,
I can close the debate, I
you can
suppose.
close the debate. Councillor Michael?
Sorry, just one thing quickly. I'm generally supportive of this motion, but not the way it's written. So can we just say when we're going to meet again, maybe what we're going to do in between? Maybe you're going to speak to that, Simon, because at the moment I've been, yeah.
Well,
Through the chair, this is a formal motion. This is what the motion is. There's no changing of the motion. It is a formal motion that the question lie on the table. If it's not the way you wanted to vote, then you wouldn't vote with the formal motion, but this is a formal motion and that's how the legislation is.
that's right.
Just, sorry, if I can just provide some clarity around this. So in relation to the formal motion, there are only a number of formal motions, and this formal motion simply says that it lie on the table. Should a special meeting be requested of next Tuesday night, it would need to go through the special meeting calling process to do so. And that special meeting, the agenda could be obviously detailed, being the consideration of the budget item or bringing a motion off the table for discussion. So I think, so two separate things, if that helps you, Councillor Michael.
Yeah, it does. So I don't know if I'm allowed to keep speaking on this. So you could say
You can tonight.
vote on this motion, and then 3 elected members approach the CEO and say, we would like a special meeting, and so then the motion sort of works. It's just as Carrie's explained, yeah, we can't change it, but
That's right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, tomorrow. Councillor Peter?
Or alternatively, that the formal motion we have in front of us that reads that the question lie on the table until next Tuesday.
But then what do we do? Through the chair, I'm incredibly uncomfortable with the wording of that motion. The question lie on the table, that's borderline slang. It's not professional, I believe.
This is slang of the slang.
That's right.
Just through the chair and in relation to the formal motion that is there, the formal motion as it is written is according to the meeting procedures and the regulations. So we all understand that what we want to do with it and when we want to bring it back, but they're two separate matters.
It's a separate motion. So any further discussion on the question that lying on the table?
Actually, if I can have a question, so if it's just laying on the table, what does it automatically do? When does it come back automatically if you don't do anything? It never comes back. Lovely. So it doesn't automatically come back the next Tuesday. Good.
No.
Lovely.
Just. That's right. Well, councillors, I think we've probably had enough debate on this one. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? All those against? 4, 4, 5. The motion is carried. So the question lies on the table. Well, that's probably enough said for tonight, I would think, on that basis. Just close the meeting. Oh, we've got another matter, haven't we?
Motion 4.1 today.
Just put anything. Item 4.1, councillors. Move on to that matter. Talking about this one.
That particular matter.
Is more, have I got the renumbered one or the old one? The matter is a behavioural management framework, councillors. Have you got that as item 5? Or have you got it 4.1? Has everyone got this particular matter in front of them? Are there any questions in relation to this matter? Yeah, I haven't got anything. What's on it? Just the range, just last night's board and risk.
I don't think there's any questions on it.
Funny how, I thought there was some background.
Yes. There it is.
There it is. Yep, that's right. There we go, councillors. Found the matter. I'll take back all that I said under my breath. Councillors, are there any questions in relation to this matter? Councillor Simon.
I'm happy to move the motion.
Councillor, any second that, Councillor Fabio? Any discussion? Councillors? Any questions or comments? If not, I'll put the recommendation. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried. Wow. See, we can agree. Thank you, councillors. That's enough of the agenda for tonight. We now get to talk about our next meeting. Are we going to propose a meeting date tonight or for a special meeting? If so, I need three councillors to approach the CEO in relation to that.
The mayor can do it anyway, can't he? Can he call a special meeting?
No.
So, I would suggest that we do it next Tuesday because I think we've got a workshop then anyway, haven't we? So we can do that at the start and then go into the workshop.
Harry, you had a calendar in front of you?
Yeah, through the chair, thank you. You're correct, there is a workshop. There was meant to be a Strategy and Economic Development Committee meeting. That has been postponed now because we'll just be having the workshop. So if council wishes, we can have the initial meeting and then the workshop after.
Okay, councillors, you could happy with that we adjourn until next Tuesday. I do hope though that we come to this meeting with an open mind and the fact that of what Nigel has summarised tonight and what he said there. It's so important. There's a regulatory process here that we must follow. So timelines, and we don't want to get down to the fine detail of bobby pins and pencils and rubbers. We've really got to look at the big picture and get this out there to our community. So let them have a say. And they're the important people. Let them have a say. We can distill what comes back and we can add to that or subtract or whatever we want to do. It's not trying to bog everyone down. I do feel that these sorts of issues are always hard, that it's such a complex document and there's so much in there to try and take it in one hit is very hard. And we've all got our own priorities of what we think is important as well. Some people think that is, other people think that is. So it's not trying to shut people down at all, but to try and get an outcome that's extremely difficult at times. And I do understand everyone's feelings on the matter. Councillor Cox?
Yeah, Bill, I think you made a very good point. It is quite complex and there's a lot to do. And then I didn't have it on Thursday, and then today's Tuesday. I just didn't feel I've got a good enough grasp on it. That's why I think it'd be good to do it next week.
I think in all honesty, this is sort of nothing to do with the process has generally been pretty good. But I think the business case aspects of what's required to get it in there in the first place, we need to understand that a bit better. Because quite frankly, I don't particularly understand it either. Putting a business case together, I think our next workshop, if we could get to understand how we do that a bit clearer, we wouldn't be as bogged down tonight as we have been. That would help.
If I can ask a question, because I understand how the business case thing works. I've done it before. So, but the business case always adds money expenditure, right? So how do you deduct this expenditure? Is that a business case as well?
Well,
because we're saying we had all the chance about. But how do I say we want to reduce spending? That's not a business case, is it?
The business cases develop the budget, don't they? So, and if we get to understand what those business cases are, we can analyse them and say, no, we don't agree with it.
I think ultimately what will happen is if there are areas where you don't believe we should spend money, then what the staff will do is bring back to you and advise you what impact it will have to the services that are provided.
But is there a formal way of doing that? Because if there's a formal way of saying I want to increase the spending, business cases, is there a formal way of saying I want to decrease spending? Or is it just sending you an email saying, or how do I formally do that?
I would say the best way is to just directly engage with the people who are responsible for that area and ask the question and say, hey, look, what impact would this be? Have that conversation early, get the understanding, and then look at going, okay, is this something I want to bring to the table or not? Or, you've got a good understanding of what that service actually is first.
Yeah, I do think we do need to be a bit clearer about that because it is a bit confusing and the timing of it as well. Some of these business cases were put forward months ago. I can't even remember what a lot of them were. That goes back quite a bit, so we need to streamline that a little bit. I'm sure we can.
Mr.
Thanks,
Mayor-
everybody, for your input tonight. It has been a difficult.
Mr. Mayor, I remember when Peter and I were first on council, we both thought that the library funds were excessive, weren't they? And so we had a strong feeling that we should get rid of the library. But you suddenly find that you've got these service requirements that you've got to maintain. And although you want to cut pepper to a slasher funding, you can't do it. There's a certain amount of level funding in there, and you know, get rid of all the books. Well, we don't need books, do we? Get rid of all and yet we tried, didn't we, Pete? But we didn't get anywhere because there's a certain service level that is required.
Absolutely. We get funded by state government.
Yeah, and we can direct Richard to say, look, we want to change our funding. You know, want to look at different economic development areas, and then Richard's got to say, well, what do you want to do? What service do you want to cut out? And then we've got to say, well, no,
We don't want to cut anything out.
give us some ideas. You know, I mean, it's up to us to direct our inquiry through Richard or to the managers. Richard allowed us to contact the manager. I think it's pretty generous. It's saying, look, we think you're spending too much in libraries or economic development. What can you do about it? And then he's got to come back to us.
But all these have got to be based on facts too. You know, that facts make a hell of a difference to sometimes our questions. Thanks, everybody, and sorry we dragged it out a bit longer than we would have liked, but robust discussion it's called.